You walk into a room a few minutes late. The door opens, and for a split second, it feels like everything stops. Conversations pause, heads turn, and every pair of eyes locks onto you. You notice everything at once: the way your clothes sit, the slight sweat on your forehead, the small imperfection you were already thinking about before you walked in. It feels like you have just stepped onto a stage, like you are being watched, evaluated, and remembered. But what feels real in that moment is not what actually happened, because in reality, almost no one noticed you at all. This disconnect between what you feel and what actually exists is one of the most consistent patterns in human perception. Psychologists call it the spotlight effect. It describes the tendency to dramatically overestimate how much other people notice you, your behavior, and your appearance. Your brain creates the illusion that you are at the center of attention, even when everyone else is focused almost entirely on themselves. And once you start to see how this works, it becomes difficult to ignore how much of your behavior has been shaped by an audience that barely exists. The idea was demonstrated through a simple but revealing experiment. Participants were asked to wear a highly noticeable shirt into a room full of strangers. Not just any shirt, but one designed to feel socially uncomfortable, something that would make the person wearing it believe they would stand out immediately. After entering the room and sitting briefly, they were taken out and asked a question. How many people in the room do you think noticed what you were wearing? Most participants estimated that a large portion of the room had seen it, often close to half. Then the researchers asked the people who had been in the room what they actually noticed. The results were consistent and surprisingly low. Only a small percentage of people even registered the shirt. Many did not notice anything unusual at all. Some did not even remember the person entering the room. The gap between perception and reality was not small. It was significant. People believed they were being observed at nearly double the rate that they actually were. This pattern did not depend on embarrassment. When the experiment was repeated using clothing that people would normally feel proud of wearing, the results stayed the same. Whether the attention was positive or negative, people still believed they were being noticed far more than they actually were. The brain does not just exaggerate fear of judgment, it exaggerates visibility itself. The same effect appears in conversation. After speaking in a group, people consistently believe that others noticed more of what they said than they actually did. Their best points feel more impactful than they were. Their awkward pauses feel more obvious than they were. Their mistakes feel more memorable than they were. In reality, most listeners are only partially paying attention, filtering information through their own thoughts, concerns, and internal dialogue. To understand why this happens, you have to look at how perception is anchored. You experience the world from a single point of view, your own. Your thoughts, your emotions, your physical sensations are vivid and immediate. When you feel nervous, it feels intense. When you notice a flaw, it feels obvious. When you make a mistake, it feels amplified. And when you try to estimate how much of that is visible to others, you start from that intensity. This is where the distortion begins. You attempt to adjust for the fact that other people have their own perspectives, but the adjustment is never enough. You remain anchored to your own experience. The result is a consistent overestimation of how much of your internal state is visible externally. You assume that what feels strong to you must also look obvious to everyone else. But that assumption is wrong more often than it is right. A simple way to see this is to reverse the situation. Think about the last time you were in a public space surrounded by strangers: an elevator, a waiting room, a crowded hallway. Can you remember specific details about the people around you, what they were wearing, how they looked, whether they seemed confident or uncomfortable? Most of the time, you cannot. Not because those details were not there, but because your attention was directed inward. Now consider that each of those people was likely thinking the same way. Each one focused on their own concerns, their own appearance, their own behavior. Each one assuming, at least to some degree, that they were being noticed. This creates a strange situation where everyone feels observed, while almost no one is actually observing anyone else in detail. This pattern is not random, it has roots in human evolution. For most of human history, people lived in small groups where social reputation had direct consequences for survival. Being judged negatively by the group could lead to exclusion, and exclusion meant danger. In that environment, it made sense for the brain to be highly sensitive to social attention. Overestimating how much you were being watched was safer than underestimating it. But the modern environment is completely different. You interact with far more people than your brain was designed to track. Most of those interactions are brief, low stakes, and quickly forgotten. The cost of being noticed is much lower than it once was, but the underlying cognitive bias remains the same. Your brain still operates as if every social interaction carries the weight of long-term consequence. There is another layer to this effect that makes it even more powerful. Psychologists refer to it as the illusion of transparency. This is the belief that your internal emotional state is visible to others, that your anxiety, your uncertainty, your discomfort can be clearly seen on your face or in your behavior. When you feel nervous, you assume it shows. When you feel embarrassed, you assume others can detect it immediately. But controlled studies show something very different. When people are asked to perform tasks while feeling anxious, they consistently rate their own nervousness as highly visible. Observers, however, rate them as much more composed than they believe themselves to be. The difference is not subtle. It is consistent across situations. What feels obvious internally is often barely noticeable externally. This has important implications. It means that much of the hesitation people experience in social situations is based on a false assumption, the belief that others can see their discomfort as clearly as they feel it. In reality, most of that experience remains internal. It does not translate outward with the same intensity. What makes this even more interesting is that simply understanding this effect can change behavior. When people are informed that their internal state is less visible than they think, their anxiety tends to decrease. Not because the situation changes, but because their interpretation of it changes. They stop assuming that every mistake or moment of discomfort is being closely observed. This shift leads to measurable differences in performance. People speak more clearly, engage more confidently, and take more social risks when they no longer feel like they are under constant observation. The removal of a perceived audience changes how they act, even though the external environment remains the same. Modern environments, especially digital ones, can complicate this perception. Social platforms create the impression of visibility through metrics like views, likes, and followers. They reinforce the idea that you are being watched. But even there, attention is fragmented and brief. Most content is consumed quickly and forgotten just as quickly. The sense of being constantly observed is stronger than the reality of sustained attention. If you look at how people actually behave, the pattern becomes clear. Individuals spend far more time thinking about their own actions than analyzing the actions of others. The moment you replay in your head for days is often a moment that no one else remembers. The mistake that feels significant to you fades quickly in the minds of everyone else. This has a direct impact on behavior. Many opportunities are avoided not because of real consequences, but because of perceived attention. People hesitate to speak, to act, to try, because they believe they are being watched more closely than they are. The cost of potential embarrassment feels high, even when the actual audience is minimal. Understanding the spotlight effect does not eliminate self-awareness, but it changes how that awareness is interpreted. It shifts the focus from imagined observation to actual reality. It reduces the weight of minor social risks, and over time, that shift can change how often you choose to act instead of hesitate. Because if the level of attention you assume is inaccurate, then many of the limitations built around that assumption are unnecessary. The hesitation, the overthinking, the constant adjustment of behavior to manage perception, all of it is based on a distorted estimate. And once that distortion is clear, something else becomes possible. You can start making decisions based on what you want to do rather than how you think it will be perceived. You can take actions that feel slightly uncomfortable without assuming they will be remembered or judged in a lasting way. The next time you feel like all attention is focused on you, it is worth questioning that feeling, not dismissing it, but examining it. Because more often than not, the attention you are reacting to exists only in your perception. Other people are not studying you as closely as you think. They are occupied with their own thoughts, their own concerns, their own version of the same illusion. They are not watching you. They are wondering who is watching them.